Hello, I hope everyone's doing well tonight, or today, or whenever you're watching this, and staying warm. I'm going to be doing my presentation on the Nile Mosaic of Palestrina, and I hope I'm saying that right. So, some background info. So, the mosaic was made around 100 BCE, so that's like 1st century, I believe. It's part of the floor of the sanctuary of Fortuna Primigenia, or Fortuna the Firstborn, and it was added to the sanctuary by Sulla, specifically the Sulla from the social wars that we learned about in class. Also, the Nile mosaic would occasionally be called later on the Barberini mosaic on account of the family that had it removed from the sanctuary before being restored in about 1640. It's approximately 6.5 meters by 5.3 meters, which is about 21 feet by 17 feet. So I actually did manage to find a reference to my piece specifically in a primary text, and that text being Pliny the Elder's Natural Histories. And on the subject, Pliny has markedly little to say, but he does give us this little blurb in that, quote, mosaics came into use as early as Sulla's regime. At all events, there exists even today one made of very small cubes, which he installed in the Temple of Fortune in Pranistre. I hope I pronounced that right, but that's what Palestrina was called during those times. After that, ordinary tessellated floors were driven from the ground level and found a new home in the vaulted ceilings, being now made of glass. And I'll talk more about what tessellated means exactly a little later on. It's a mosaic technique. And this is a picture of what the Nile mosaic looks like. I'm not sure what it looks like when it's installed. I couldn't find a picture of that was credibly sourced, but the mosaic shows the Nile in full flood and activities that likely would have occurred in and around the Nile, with boats sailing through it and various animals hanging around. There's some camels, there's some fish, there's some alligators and some hippos, cattle, and other things. And there are buildings around, likely meant to represent some of the civilizations, or some of the cities, excuse me, that existed around that time. And another notable thing that you can't really see on this, but all the animals are labeled in Greek, which is very interesting. So, mosaic techniques. I mentioned tessellated mosaics before when I quoted Pliny, but basically what a tessellated mosaic is a very standard mosaic, sort of, where chunks of marble or glass or stone or whatever was being used to make the mosaic were cut into respectively small pieces, probably like dime-sized by our standards, and set in a bed of mortar. And they were fairly abstract in appearance. They definitely made a shape, as evidenced by this picture of a different mosaic from the House of Ginimedi. I hope I pronounced that right. But that's an example of a tessellated mosaic where you can very clearly see the squares that make up the pattern. Whereas the Nile mosaic specifically is classified as a opus vermiculatium mosaic. So how I like to remember that is V as in very small, because the pieces are a lot smaller and closely packed together in order to create a more picturesque appearance. Going back to the Nile mosaic, looking at it from afar like this, you can't really even tell that it's a mosaic. It looks more like a painting than it does what you would assume a mosaic to look like, or as it doesn't look as much as a mosaic compared to the tessellated mosaic that I have pictured here. And that has to do with how the tesserae, which is the name for the little pieces that are used to make up mosaics, they were cut much smaller when it came to the vermiculitium style of mosaic. And interestingly, this was specifically a Hellenistic technique. So, how are mosaics made? I'm probably not going to actually play this video for you here because I don't want it to eat up too much of my time, and honestly, it would kind of be a waste for me to talk over it too much because it's actually very thorough in its description as it is being as a the process of creating a mosaic is being demonstrated for us in this video by a master mosaic maker. This video specifically was from the Art Institute of Chicago and is found specifically detailing the creation of a Byzantine mosaic. The principle is about the same as it would be for a Roman mosaic. And it's playing for me anyway. Okay, there we go. So the question would probably be, why exactly is the Nile mosaic, which is representing a very iconic piece of Egypt, specifically in the sanctuary of Fortuna of all places? Well, this is really just my theory, but I know that historically Egypt was a very important place of trade for Rome as an agricultural hub. They imported a lot of wheat, grain, things that they made a lot of food, mainly bread, because it was referenced as the breadbasket of Rome later on in the empire. But it was, even before that point, recognized as a incredibly wealthy city, or not city, country. It was recognized as a very wealthy kingdom with plenty of resources, and there have been marked, how do I want to phrase this? There have been lots of encounters with Egypt, I suppose, in the past between Rome and Egypt. Some less friendly than others, but the point is, the Nile was basically the symbol of the Kingdom of Egypt's prosperity, pretty much. The Nile River in flood would make it accessible to the Mediterranean, while also basically rejuvenating the farmlands within reach of the Nile's flood area, which was why it was so great for growing things like grain at. So this is a lot of preamble to say that because Egypt eventually became the breadbasket of Rome, and by the point of the 1st century BCE would have been recognized as a very wealthy and prosperous kingdom, the idea of placing such a mosaic of what basically could be read as a symbol of Egypt's prosperity, the Nile River and flood, and the temple of the goddess of fortune would have had very positive connotations. And since it was specifically placed there by Sulla, it could also be assumed that he might have been trying to send a political message to the people that he would bring Rome prosperity as the Nile does to Egypt. Basically trying to say, hey, I'll be good for you guys. So maybe don't revolt against me and try to kill me like I have done to my political adversaries. And also, apparently, there was evidence that the Egyptian goddess Isis was syncretized with Fortuna when when Isis's cult arrived to the Roman world, due to both goddesses being worshipped as maternal and fertility goddesses, which was actually a markedly big thing that occurred in that era, because Rome was very well known for syncretizing gods and goddesses, and Isis was remarkably popular. And what else can I say? But yeah, the Mosaic of the Nile also supposedly had a companion mosaic of fish in a secondary recess. I wasn't able to find any pictures of that, so I hesitated to put it in my presentation. But yeah, uh, hopefully this is all right. And it's playing again. And these are my sources. Hopefully everybody's having a good night or afternoon or whatever time you're listening to this. And I will see you all in class.